when his peers informed him he thought the world was crashing down on him, he came out looking forward to a promising future, to being unsure of everything else in an instant. He'd gotten deceived his entire existence for whatever reason so his dad can be spared. And now, whatsoever he did, the lions were ready to come, falling to pieces like a house of cards. Join me today as we uncover the story of a man learns adopted sister is biological mum and realises what he has done. But before we dig down deep, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to hit the notification bell to get updated whenever a new video is published. Without further ado, let's get straight into it. How it all started. When his friends told him he felt this world clamp, he'd gone from looking to a bright future to being uncertain of everything in a heartbeat. He'd been lied to for his entire life, and for what? So that his father could be protected? And now the lions were about to come crashing down like a house of cards. What does he do? It really was a shameful truth that had spread across the community. Except for Steve, everyone knew. Steve has 8 siblings, despite a significant age difference between him and his older sister Joni. He'd never given it any thought before. Mary and Don Lichton expressed their desire for a second child to him. That was the end of it, and besides, he had never considered questioning them. He believed that the folks who reared him were the only individuals he could trust to give him the truth. But to defend the people, how far were they ready to go? Mary and Don did everything they could to keep Steve from finding out what had occurred. They were successful to a certain level, but he also had an unspoken sense something wasn't quite right by the time he'd entered puberty. He attributed his uneasiness to typical adolescent urges. However, regardless of how he tried to persuade himself otherwise, the urges persisted. Something didn't seem to add up. Conversely, everybody within Steve's small, tight-knit community knew his friends, siblings, peers, instructors, and perhaps even his high school sweetheart. Anywhere and everywhere he went, murmurs and rumours surrounded him, but the ultimate mystery remained hidden behind locked doors. For 18 months, the LinkedIn controversy was shrouded in secrecy. Mary and Don did everything they could to hide the issue hidden from him. Yet, as secrets often do, it was ultimately revealed. On the day of his graduation from high school, though, Steve was not ready to hear it. Steve had been blissfully oblivious to the family's terrible secret for quite some time. Vance and Alan, 2 of his closest pals, were with him. When they realised the falsehood that had been going on for a long time, even their parents had pledged them to secrecy. It was clear that the time had come. It really was time to give Steve the unpleasant reality, because if they didn't, who would? He was well aware of his father's actions over the years. Vance and Alan exchanged glances as they sought to approach the problem with caution. He pondered the implications of the news he almost had to deliver. It would have a significant impact on him. Steve's parents, he knew, seemed to have no interest whatsoever in giving him the truth and would be embarrassed if the household's name was revealed. Steve, on the other hand, was about to join the Marines, and it was finally their opportunity that they wanted to share something with Steve. But is it the right time? The beans about to spill. He claimed at first that Steve could not really understand what his buddy was trying to convey. Alan gave Vance a sidelong glance, but he shrugged him away and shouted, "No, he wants to know what he needed to know." Vance carried on saying that it's about Joni, his sister. As Vance poured out the story that very day, Steve felt the world as he knew it fracture into a million pieces. He couldn't be stopped. Now they are filled with quietness and what they knew because Steve was motionless. They informed him who his mother had been, and that they had known Steve for decades, for most of their life. And that was something that everyone knew, as well as they believed that now might be an opportunity for him to find out. So who is the mother, finally? Joni, Steve's sister, was the biological parent according to Vance. Steve, paying attention to a trash bin, if Joni is his mum, whom did he refer to as parents for the last 18 years? During that discovery, he seemed to have no idea who he really was, much less what all of this means. However, once Vance finished explaining, he had one query. Who else knows? Do you feel betrayed? With bright blue eyes, Steve inquired, and Alan responded softly to anyone and everyone. Steve could not even imagine the whole community had already been managing to keep him in the dark. He was angry because he'd been betrayed. The sense of humiliation then turned into wrath. His biological father was a member of a band. His personal existence, as well as he knew, vanished in a plume of dust, unveiling the dark secret at just the heart of it all. He made the best decision he can through how much he has. Steve hid the truth from his family for the next 2 months before facing them. They wore enormous grins to his graduation ceremony while Steve acted through, but it was all a charade. After learning that, Steve recalls it being mid-May 1987. I didn't really say anything. He graduated from high school. He never spoke at the graduation. He attended all or most of the festivities and did all of it, and it was just a matter of time until the ticking time bomb exploded. He managed to keep everything bottled up for yet another month and a half. After that, he will be confronting his family and friends. Steve stated at a furious 18 years old he ran away, got behind a wheel and decided to drive to the closest town 20 miles away. He and his buddies rented a room. There had been a knock. Joni was standing there when Steve unlocked the door. She pushed him to the ground and admitted the lady he'd always considered his elder sister. They seemed to have a time when they realised, yep, this did happen. He apologised for the inconvenience, as he kept to himself for mostly everything. But now that the truth came to light, will Steve's relatives and birth mother feel willing to talk about it? This was basically a tiny town with intimate communication. They were simply striving to be excellent neighbours, said the neighbourhood resident who noticed but didn't even say much. Joni had become pregnant out of wedlock. Therefore, her family chose to raise Steve to be their own to preserve the family legacy. However, contrary to popular belief, this circumstance isn't as rare as it appears. According to Dani Shapiro, who interviewed Steve for her podcast, Family Stories, an increasing number of individuals are uncovering their actual ancestry due to the growing prevalence of home DNA. She even went above and beyond to call it an epidemic. But was it really appropriate for a household to retain such secrecy about its own members' personal identities? Individuals throughout the end do have the right to decide, and I believe that revealing the truth liberates them. Dani remarked through an upcoming interview that these secret keepers have a responsibility. However, the problem isn't whether they might disclose the secret, but rather, is Steve prepared to heal after discovering his personal truth? Steve enlisted in the army immediately upon discovering that his sister was actually his natural parent. He married and settled down after completing his term. He went on to have a prosperous writing career at NBC News, but his marriage didn't work out, and the pair divorced. Joni, Don, and Mary Jane never discussed his actual roots. He was indeed a pretty happy-go-lucky person in secondary school, but there's something in him turned off. The romance had developed into a shambles. He emphasised that it was simply a matter of obligation, even though it was the same for the entire family. They are from a vast family with 6 sisters and 2 brothers. He had the impression that they're all in it as well. So he chose the most straightforward route out and simply distanced himself. Steve managed to put himself in his mother's shoes. She'd thrown up her son and therefore had to lie about it. He was struggling to comprehend what he might have been like for her to have a kid, visit her own parents, take the baby, and then to be told that perhaps the story is going to really be that you have to say to the baby that your mother is not your sister. Joni, on the other hand, decided to ditch him. She claims she wouldn't really like to abandon me. That, according to my parents, is not correct. That was just what she required. Now I believe it falls somewhere around the midway, as with most things. This is the narrative, Steve said, and he thinks she was told, if we're heading down that slippery slope, this is really the tale we'll tell, and you'll have to stick to it. She had no desire to be part of his self-discovery trip or documentary. She just stated that she had seen Steve's film and that she understood why he did it. Steve noted that he doesn't want anything to do with it in the future and pleaded with them not to ask him to participate. Steve and Joni exchanged a few emails, but they haven't spoken in a long time. Steve felt as though a sense of relief was off his shoulders after the shooting. He was able to have these discussions, and as they could have a dialogue that would have not happened otherwise because of the film. So at the end of the day, he can say this did what it was meant to do. What do you think? If you were in Steve's situation, what would you do? Is secrecy worth keeping? Let me know your thoughts in the comments section down below. Before leaving, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell.